Hello everyone and welcome back to this second episode of Moocall's 10 Talk series. My name is Stephen Fagan and I'm head of our operations and design here at Moocall. In this webinar, I'm just going to be discussing calving season and how farmers should be planning well in advance for it. So just on the topics for discussion on this episode, we'll be taking a look at housing and understanding if your farm has all the essential handling facilities to cater for cows that are calving. Then we'll just be going through all the required equipment and tools that are necessary for calving cows, and also taking a look at cow nutrition prior to calving and achieving an appropriate body condition coming into the season. We'll also be looking at the importance of colostrum management and also what types of illnesses to be looking out for both cows and calves. Just being fully aware for any common mistakes also, which can be caused around calving time, and in an effort then to stop them from happening, we'll just go through what to be looking out for. And then finally, just being vigilant post calving and ensuring both you and your farm are prepared, especially from a farm safety aspect. So firstly, we'll just look at the appropriate housing and handling facilities. So one of the main things that you need to be prepared for is having the correct housing on your farm. So there is a checklist that you should follow around this commencing. So first, just to ensure that you have plenty of straw and that you're using plenty of straw around your calving pens, especially if you're facing into a cold or harsh winter condition. It's to keep the calves warm and prevent any illnesses or disease. Straw in general does ensure a strong and healthy start of life for every calf. So bear in mind, calves should always be bedded down in a clean place. So just to refresh this straw in the shed and add regularly to it if it's becoming light or very dirty. If you are leaving any dirty bedding sitting there for a while, it could lead to the calf ingesting manure or other contaminants, which in turn could lead to them getting sick as a newborn. So look at calves on average would spend between 75 to 80% of their time lying down anyway. So it's just keeping it clean, is very crucial from a health aspect more so than anything else. For each cow that is calving down, just make sure that they have sufficient amount of space in your handling facilities or in the housing pens that you're keeping them in. Just so they have that space when they are calving, it does reduce their stress levels, especially mortalities even at birth, and just to allow for the cow to give the calf a good start to life and let them have space to get up and suckle. So just on, I suppose, the both cold and warm water aspect, it's good to have cold, clean water readily available for your cow just after calving, more so for drinking purposes. But it's also good to get her up and get her hydrated after calving. The warm water is more so just for cleaning the equipment and between each calving in case you are going assisting a cow during labour or you have to attend another cow depending on how many you have calving at any one time. Ventilation then is just one of the basics, but obviously it has to be adhered to for all your calving sheds. One, you don't want any cows obviously sweating profusely in a stuffy housing, or two, the complete opposite where the cow is getting cold at night or there's a bad draft running around young calves. In a ventilated shed, animals are shown by research to perform much better, so it's less likely for them to develop any respiratory infections or even the likes of pneumonia. So on handling facilities, a safe open pen with a calving gate is really the ideal setup, especially where you have a very sick cow or even a heifer that is a bit more agitated coming closer to the calving. It can be a dangerous enough environment for both you and the cow. Ultimately, at the end of the day, your safety has to be just taken as the priority on it. So just on this slide, do you have all your calving equipment ready? I suppose the biggest thing is not to leave it to the last minute to go to your local co-op or agri store and get all the little bits that you might need. So your checklist should include, I suppose, given pre-calving lick buckets or powders to the cows in advance of calving, just so you're ensuring that they're meeting the correct dietary levels and even the correct mineral intake before calving down. A working and easy to use calving jack is obviously essential. So not to have a very stiff lever on it or making sure that it's not a very heavy thing to maneuver, where you'll need a calving jack is kind of when you're obviously in the pinnacle of a calving and you need to make sure it's working correctly and assisting the cow. Then back to the basics, just have a strong and well-designed calving ropes. It's no harm to have a spare set, depending on how compact your calving season is. Get plenty of appropriate calving gels or lubricants for any difficult calvings or big calves that you might be having. Particularly if you're calving indoors, have iodine spray at the ready for spraying on the calves' navel immediately after they're after giving birth, just to prevent any infection to the navel itself. Disposable vet gloves, ideally if you have ones that go up the full length of your arm, alongside with a whiteboard just for jotting down records around the birth. And finally, a stomach tube on standby is an ideal thing to have around for any calf that is struggling to stand up or to get their first suck from the cow. Have the beasons ready and give it to them early, and it will get the calf up and going. And then finally, just to have disinfectant for the shed, just so you can clean it down between calvings and get out any of that bloody straw to put in some fresh stuff too. So then just moving on, I suppose the next thing you need to be just vigilant on is ensuring excellent nutrition before calving for your cows or heifers. You should be aiming to achieve ideally a body condition score of between 3 to 3.5, just to make sure that the cows are in the correct shape and physical condition for calving correctly. Provide any dry cows with sufficient pre-calving minerals, as I just mentioned, around 6 to 8 weeks prior to calving commencing. Ultimately, this is to prevent milk fever and the cow retaining their placenta just after calving. Also to produce, a healthy and live calf at the end of the day, and to ensure that the cow calves with adequate minerals in their system, so calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D. So just how important is colostrum, and are you managing it correctly? There is no beating around the bush really with it. Newborn calves need it, and they require about 2 litres of colostrum or beasons, ideally within the first 30 minutes after being born. Preferably, it's better to go down the natural route for new calves and let them get the first milk from their mother. But where colostrum levels might be poor, especially with the likes of heifers, you can avail of some powdered milk supplements to use instead. So what does it do for the calf? So it's for the provision of antibodies and for vitamins A and D primarily. It does prevent a lot against diseases and to help the calf build up his immune system, especially in the earlier days and weeks of life. And finally, it provides the essential kickstart for them to just get up and going. So now we'll just be taking a look at illnesses and what you should be looking out for before, during and after calving. So for the cows, some of the biggest things to look out for are the likes of milk fever, which is caused by a lack of calcium, grass tetany caused by a lack of magnesium, liver fluke is obviously an ingested parasitic worm, and even at calving then just retaining the placenta. Those are all things you want to try avoid as much as possible. So then for the calf, just on the list below, we've got Jones disease caused by, an infected colostrum mainly, or infected manure where bacteria just gets in and starts damaging the gut wall of the calf, resulting in even the calf having some digestive problems. You have the likes of pneumonia, which is caused by kind of a combination of different things around viral and bacterial pathogens. Even environmental stress can bring it on, and animals' own resilience to disease. I suppose the big one then is just on scours. They do come in a lot of different forms, such as crypto, coccidia, and even the likes of non-infectious scours as well, which are kind of more common. So it's important to keep calves separated where scour is present to avoid the spread, and try to keep the calf pen and scour as clean as much as possible. This is where your disinfectant that I was just mentioning earlier is vital, just for cleaning down your calving facility. And then finally, you have just bleeding calf syndrome there, as I'd mentioned, which is caused by just antibodies absorbed into the colostrum. They do affect the production of red and white blood cells, and this ultimately then stops the immune system from functioning correctly. So look, as you can see, from each of these factors, from both a cow's point of view and a calf's point of view, there's many things that can cause illnesses. So it's important just not to take your eye off the ball when it comes to this in your calving season. Next here, we'll just be taking a look at how to cut down on any mistakes, around when you are calving cows. It starts really during your breeding season, when you're selecting your bulls. So whether you're using AI or a stock bull, just try to avoid any overly large bulls, especially for heifers, where you'd need to just select your bulls to suit the breeds that you have stock. As I previously mentioned, have your cows in the correct shape or condition prior to calving. When calving does begin, ensure sufficient space for each cow, particularly for indoors in the winter and in the early spring. Next, I suppose you need to be looking at, calving pens and keeping them clean between cows. Keep disinfectant on fresh straw in the sheds on a regular basis. After pulling a calf that's struggling to breed, ensure to clear out their airways safely. You can hang the calf, to let mucus out and any build-up to run out of the lungs, or you can stimulate them. You can use a bit of straw to maybe push it up the nostril or get cold water even on the head or ears just to stimulate them and get them perked up. One of the biggest mistakes then around calving is just using the calving jack. So, it can cause rib and even hip fractures if it's not used correctly. So you're right when you're pulling the calf just to release the tension on the jack once the calf's ribs are outside, just to let the calf hang for a bit. The mucus will clear out, just to be vigilant not to pull or lever them in the wrong ways. They can get injured. And really, you only need to assist with a calving jack if it's required. Make sure if you are to use plenty of gels, and to only use ones that are recommended really by your vet for that purpose. And then also, if you're unsure whether the cow can calve herself, she might need a cesarean. So it's probably better off just to consult with your vet if you do have any doubts, and not to kind of stress the cow out any further or even hurt her. And next, just after calving. So what should you do once your cows have calved? I suppose plain and simple, you just need to get the calf up and get the calf going. So once the cow starts licking the calf, it helps to circulate the blood around the body, and then it gets the calf attempting to stand up just to get them up and moving. The second point there that I have is just on navel care. If a navel infection does take hold, it can expect the likes of even liver problems to joint ill to even a respiratory disease. So if you don't look to prevent the infection, you could just be setting yourself up for a slow thriving calf, or even worse, it could result in death. Finally, just keep your calving equipment clean and any sheds that you are calving, as I've already touched on. So just on my last slide here is just around farm safety at Calvin. Your housing and management facilities should be designed to minimize stress for the mother and the calf, but more importantly, to maximize your own safety. You just have to remain vigilant at all times, especially when you're moving cows or heifers that are sick in calving. If you do have any aggressive cows on the farm, it is recommended to cull them before they get any more wicked towards anyone else that may be on farm. Just exercise caution really when dealing with all your animals on farm, especially with first time calvers. Only enter a pen if you're experienced, and also if it's necessary. Just always have a mobile phone with you, just in case you need it in an emergency situation. Ultimately, you need to look after yourself, and that can only be the number one priority. Having safe and functional animal equipment does make a massive difference, as I mentioned on the calf and jack aspect. So, no matter how experienced you are, you always need to establish a physical barrier between you and a freshly calved cow, because you can never know what she's thinking about, and if it does comes to worse, you could end up seriously injured. So, in conclusion, I'd just like to thank you all again for listening to this second episode of Mookall's 10 Talk series. We are still open to further Q&As on our Instagram page there. So, if anyone does have any questions on what we may have touched on today, please feel free to reach out to us, and our team will get back to you. Just a reminder that we still have that competition going on our Instagram page, so do check that out and make sure that you have entered just to be in with a chance of winning your own Mookall sensor, and there is some other prizes there too. For any other information just on Mookall and our products, please do feel free to call us or visit our website at www.mookall.com.